Rulers East and North. It was noontime when they dropped down lightly in the gardens of Ozma's castle.
"Let's dance," proposed Benny, blinking across the vistas of velvet lawns, flowering arches, and sparkling fountains.
"Why, Benny," exclaimed Trot, "do you really feel like dancing?"
"Don't you?" questioned the Stone Man, smiling down at the little girl with whom he had come through so many exciting adventures. Trot nodded delightedly and, as the royal band grouped on the castle steps to welcome them home broke into a lively tune, the whole company, still in the ring they had formed in Cheeriob's garden, danced round and round and round, Highboy cavorting hilariously in the center. Benny could have danced tirelessly on for hours, but Cheeriob and Sir Hokus were soon out of breath. So Ozma clapped her hands and, bidding them form in a long line, placed herself at the head and marched merrily into the palace. There, drawn up to meet them, were all the celebrities they had not already met. Jack Pumpkinhead, stiffly extending his arms, tick-tock, clicking off short sentences of pleasure, the soldier with the green whiskers, bowing almost to the ground, the Cowardly Lion and Dorothy's small dog, Toto, not to mention the famous Sawhorse and so many more I could not begin to name them all. Philidor kept close to Trot, for he wanted to hear about each one, and the Scarecrow, taking Benny and the Medicine Man under his wing, saw that they were everywhere introduced. Ozma herself, with the King of the Osier Isles on one arm and the Queen on the other, led the way to the grand banquet hall. The Hungry Tiger, peering in from the castle kitchen, where he had been anxiously awaiting their return, sprang out joyously as they entered.
"This party's been ready since last night," he roared accusingly. "Where have you been?"
While Highboy dropped down a few pegs to explain, the great company seated itself at the long green banquet table. Soon dishes in silver began to clink merrily, footmen to rush to and fro with delicious trays of goodies, while the Oz Orchestra struck up that good old favorite, Oz and Ozma, Forever. Benny, to his great satisfaction, sat next to the Wizard of Oz, and between courses the little man explained that he was a native of Omaha and had first come to Oz in a circus balloon. The inhabitants had immediately taken him for a wizard, so he had decided to stay and be a wizard. For many years he had ruled over Oz, practicing the trick magic he had learned in the circus and superintending the building of the Emerald City. Later he returned to America, and Ozma, the rightful ruler of the fairy kingdom, was disenchanted by Glinda and placed upon the throne. When the wizard returned to Oz, the little fairy made him royal wizard of the realm, and by hard study and constant practice he had become the most famous magician in any country out of the world. "So you think you can change me to a real man?" queried Benny, looking admiringly at the famous wonderworker. "Certainly," replied the wizard carelessly, tossing off a glass of emeralade. "Whenever you wish." "Think it over carefully," cautioned the Scarecrow, who sat on the other side. "Is it not better to be big and hard than small and weak, like most natural beings?" "You're a very famous person as you are," he finished, flatteringly, "but as a meat man you will be quite like everybody else." "I was once a real person," he confided solemnly, "and did not care for it at all. Take my advice and stay as you are, old Boulder." "Please do," begged Trot from her place across the table. "You're so strong and handsome, and you can dance as well as anyone." "You didn't tread on my toe even once," declared the little girl stoutly. Benny would have blushed at Trot's words, had such a thing been possible. As it was, he smiled so happily that he did not look like a public benefactor at all. The stone frown that was carved on Benny's forehead had gradually melted away, and his expression was now so pleasant and jolly, I am sure none of the worthy fathers of Boston would have recognized their former citizen. "It shall be as Trot wishes," said Benny, with a fond glance across the table, and amid the cheers and claps of the celebrities, he agreed to stay as he was. "And live at our capital always," invited Ozma, from the head of the table. "And Herbie, too." "He shall be our court physician," declared Ozma, and coming round to where they sat, she touched them both on the shoulder with her emerald scepter, to show they now belonged to her court. Benny was too overcome to say a word, but Herbie, with a great gingling of pillboxes, arose and, with one hand on his medicine chest, made a lengthy speech of thanks.
Herbie made a lengthy speech.
Every time he comes near, you can hear his pills rattle, observed Highboy in a low voice to the Sawhorse. One end of the table had been reserved for the palace pets and Highboy had the seat of honor at the head. Next to him stood the Sawhorse, Ozma's little wooden, gold-shod steed, taking in everything but the refreshments and making short sharp answers to Highboy's remarks. Highboy secretly thought him a poor-looking creature, but as he wisely kept this thought to himself they got along famously. The hungry tiger's appetite amazed Highboy. After several bowls of horseradish, 2 bales of hay and a pail of yummy jummy, Highboy himself could not eat another morsel. But the tiger kept sleepily and competently on cleaning his plate. As soon as it was empty it was hastily replenished with rare roasts and undone steak and mutton. The hungry tiger, as many of you know, has lived in the Emerald City for many years and is great company for the Cowardly Lion, who came to the capital with Dorothy on her very first visit. This big beast, with long sighs, and with tears in his voice, explained how dreadfully cowardly he was, and Highboy, to see if this really were so, trumpeted suddenly in the Cowardly Lion's ear. With a terrible squeal, the Cowardly Lion slid under the table and they were just pulling him out, when the Tin Woodman arose and rapped loudly for order. The wizard had left the banquet hall a few minutes before and, now returning, whispered a few words to Ozma. At once the little fairy stood up and, facing the king and queen of the Osier Isles, began to speak. Our wizard, explained Ozma in her gentle voice, has been trying to discover the whereabouts of Cheeriob's father. But all of his questions have brought no change in the magic picture, showing that Mombi has utterly destroyed the good king of the Munchkins. As Mombi is no longer here to remedy what has been done and we ourselves are powerless to remedy it either, I now pronounce you, Cheeriob, and you, Orin, King and Queen of the East, and rulers of all of the Munchkins and the Sapphire City of Oz shall be your capital. The applause brought forth by this announcement was simply deafening. When it had subsided somewhat, the Scarecrow, jumping up, held out his hand to Orin and then the king. May I be the first to congratulate your majesties, cried the straw man, impulsively. I, myself, am a Munchkin and hereafter please consider me a loyal friend and subject. The king and queen both assured him that they would be pleased to do so and in a short address Cheeriobed promised to rule to the best of his ability the great empire of the East. Trot and Philidor, who sat side by side, heard Ozma's proclamation with great pleasure and satisfaction. I hope you'll visit us often, whispered Philidor. You can ride on my seahorse and wear my crown, and I'm going to ask my father to make you a princess, Trot. At this, Cheeriobed, who had overheard Philidor's remark, jumped up and announced that his first act as King of the East would be to create Trot a princess of the Osier Isles with the privilege of living in the Sapphire City at any time and for as long as she wanted. That makes Trot twice a princess, chuckled the Scarecrow to Benny, as the little girl slipped the sapphire ring Cheeriob held out to her in place of a crown, which he promised to give her later, on her middle finger. Hi! Hi! 3 cheers for Princess Trot, whinnied Highboy above all the noise and clapping. When Ozma could make herself heard, she again called for silence. Wondering what surprising announcement would come next, the company turned eagerly to their little ruler. As Orin is no longer Good Witch of the North and the Gillikens are without a sovereign, I have decided to make Joe and Hyacinth rulers of the North, declared Ozma imperiously, and we accept with pleasure, interrupted Highboy, not only rising to his feet but stretching up till he towered over them all. We accept this high honor your majesty has conferred upon us, and if you will just excuse me, I'll dash off and tell the good news to Joe. Holding his head so high that he bumped it on the top of the door, Highboy clattered from the banquet hall to the great astonishment and amusement of all. That is all except Trot and Philidor. Rushing after the high horse, they called loudly for him to stop. And when he saw the little girl and boy waving from the top steps of the castle, he did come and, stretching up, let each of them embrace him heartily. "I'm coming again to visit you," promised Highboy with a slight choke, for he hated to say goodbye to his little friends. "I'll see you have high positions at our court, too." Then, shaking his head and stretching up a bit higher, he cantered off, neighing tremendously as he went. "Hi! Hi! Everybody, hi! I am the highest horse in Oz. High horse to their majesties, King and Queen of the North." Arm in arm, Philidor and Trot returned to the banquet hall, and, after the last speech had been made and they had all drunk the health of the new sovereigns in pale pink lemonade, the party broke up and they all went out into the garden to play blind man's buff. As the royal family from the Osier Isles did not return to their capital for 10 days, they had plenty of time to see all the wonderful sights in the Emerald City and to grow as fond of dear little Ozma and her gay court and courtiers as we are, ourselves.